Hi everybody, this is Dr. Bosworth and I am here live at the Metabolic Health Summit. It is the second day of the conference and I am super excited to be here. The world of travel and people I think we're the only place in the country that isn't frozen to death, so we are super happy to be here. I was going to give a little update of what happened last night. There was the first keynote, and one of my favorite speakers, who is a physician who focuses on brains and ketones, Dr. Bredesen. He spoke and gave the speech he was supposed to give this morning last night, and what a treat. One of the places that I was first attracted to for metabolic health and for ketones was, how do we get brains to repair once they've been injured? As a physician who deals with chronic illnesses, chronic management of illnesses, this process of how do you repair a brain that isn't quite, Jimmy Moore coming up and giving me a thumbs up there. He's going to photobomb us. Look at that. Yay! In the world of helping patients get their brains back on track, it's an incredible part of the equation. How do we help patients get the inflammation gone and get their brains to repair? As the speech last night by Dr. Bredesen showed, and some awesome improvements in how do we know where their brains are healing. Again, the brain is really slow at repairing, but excuse me, if there was ever a time where we have the technology and we have the innovation and the science that can study brains through functional MRIs, through SPECT scans, and through the intense lab evaluations, Dr. Bredesen gave a great report on how do we help patients with that. So one of the things that I think has been a big part of my journey in helping patients is that, is a ketogenic diet going to help? And as much as I can see that in my practice, one of the processes for encouraging patients is the evidence. And Dr. Bredesen's book, which I bought last night and got signed, I felt like a groupie, is one of the better places that you can study what happens within brains. In fact, one of the places where I didn't write a book about brains was after reading his, because he's done such a great job of saying, although a mild ketosis was one of his recommendations, from a 0.5 to up to 5 ketones, shows or flexes that brain to really increase the mitochondria to use that extra fuel. He also goes into the really important things about brain health, which is sleep apnea, your vitamin B complexes, measuring those, the highly sensitive C-reactive protein, and then very importantly your ApoE4 status. So last night he began his lecture saying, everybody in the room, raise your hand if you know your hemoglobin A1C, which is that diabetic report card. And so much of the crowd raised their hand. And then he asked, how many people know what your highly sensitive C-reactive protein is? And many of us raised our hand. And then, how many of you are keto? And of course, the whole room raised their hand. But then he talked about things like, have you checked your ApoE status? And the data that says, this is the gene that says, if you have this, you're going to have Alzheimer's, right? And the answer is no. If you have this, you're at risk for Alzheimer's, at which point we need to know, is your fasting insulin down in the 5 range? Do you have your labs in order? Because this is preventable. He shared a couple of stories where the patients were incredibly intelligent people with more money than they possibly, they would buy any medical treatment that would get them better. And where he started were the basics, like what we use in my clinic. We use, do you sleep well? Treat that sleep apnea. If you've got a high insulin state, you have to get that controlled if you want that brain to repair. And I think those are some of the basics when it comes to this advanced science, that if you can't start with some of the things that the rest of us can reach, you lose your audience. So here are these wealthy people whose brains had really deteriorated, went to him and said, I have all these resources, help me get better. And he started with some of the same things that primary care physicians across the country can use, which is, what's your morning fasting sugars? What are your ketones? This is an estimate of your insulin, and you can get your insulin checked in a fancy lab, but in your home, you can check point of care, your blood glucose, your blood ketones, and when you get that ratio lower, that's a lower insulin. Those are some of the most protective things you can do to your brain. Today, he was supposed to speak this morning, and there are 2 other really amazing lecturers that are going to speak this morning on further educating us on brains with Alzheimer's and brain repair. And I I don't know if I'll get to interview them, but I will for sure come back and let you know that I am going to give a recap of what they teach us. I have some incredible slides from yesterday that I will definitely be making some videos about to get this condensed version, but if you haven't followed me on Instagram, you're going to see some of those slides pop up on Instagram. So Dr Boz _ Annette Bosworth is what I am on Instagram. And then follow the hashtag MHS, standing for Metabolic Health Summit 2019. So hashtag MHS 2019. All right, thanks for the short video. It is little, but it's getting really crowded in here, and I hope you can still hear me.